Hello everyone, I welcome you back to the session 5 of the week 3. Now this is precisely the last session which we'll be doing for this week, which is all about strategic selling. So as far as the last session was concerned, or if I talk about the last point of the previous session, I had left you with one of the videos by Neil Rackham where I wanted you to understand the relevance of the spin selling method as far as today's sales dynamics is concerned. So I hope you really enjoyed listening to that session, and we'll be really happy to read your views or what do you think about that session in the forum. Now as we proceed now, we'll be definitely talking about the remaining theories of selling. We'll also be kind of having a brief discussion about the practical relevance of the selling theories which we have discussed so far. We'll also be getting into understanding the Miller Heiman approach to selling, and finally we'll be looking at one of the strategic virtual selling frameworks. Now we have already talked about AIDS model, right set of circumstances theory, spin selling. Now we'll be moving ahead with behavioral equations theory. Now as far as behavioral equations theory is concerned, it is also considered as an advanced version of the right set of circumstances theory, or maybe you can say it is more refined if you look into the perspectives of right set of circumstances theory. And obviously it is the Professor J. Howard who stands credited for developing this theory, and he belongs to the Columbia Graduate School of Business. Now one of the key facets about this theory is that this theory particularly relies on the elements of learning, or maybe you can say the 4 key elements of learning, which are drives, cues, response and reinforcement. Now before we get further into understanding or dissecting this theory, I want you to understand what learning is. Now if we get very technical, learning simply means a relatively permanent change in behavior, or to put it in more simplistic way, you can say whatever you have learned from your experiences, if you start applying that, and the changes that come in your behavior will be called as learning. Let's say you gifted someone a chocolate and they really liked it. So next time you did the same and they really liked it. Then on the basis of this behavior, on third time also you might think of giving them the same chocolate. Or maybe you can say you consumed a particular eatable which made you feel very healthy. So next time when you use the same again you felt healthy. Now this connection between you feeling healthy might get associated with that particular product which you are using, and eventually in the future also you might prefer using the same product. So this constitutes an element of learning. I'll again repeat it. If you look at it from a technical perspective, we can say it is a relatively permanent change in behavior that primarily comes from your repeated experiences. Now this particular theory also rests on the philosophy of stimulus organism response model, which was proposed by Mehrabian and Russell. I would urge you to go and read more about it, but still to kind of put things in perspective, this particular theory says that if you provide someone with a stimulus, or maybe let's say you provide them piece of information or something like that which might have a cognitive element, then it eventually leads to the effective changes which is considered as an organism. Let's say someone might develop a positive attitude, might feel good about using a particular product, then eventually which will lead to the response, which means they might go ahead and buy the product, or maybe start recommending the product to other people. Now see, in today's scenario we can't just limit responses to using the product or buying it. Eventually this is what an organization wants, or maybe a seller would want. But if someone starts talking positively about your product, maybe let's say on social media or in their circle, then that can also be termed as some kind of payoff. So this is another perspective which I wanted you to understand. Now when you talk about a drive, it simply means the strong internal stimuli, that encourages an individual to act, or maybe you can say this is more like what motivates an individual to act, right? Now this can happen in two ways. This could be innate or this could be learned. Now when you are talking about innate, which means that is coming from your physiology. Let's say if you're feeling hungry, right, you will definitely go and either buy maybe let's say a burger from somewhere, or you might place an order from either Zomato or Swiggy, or something which is basically coming from your physiology. Let's say if you're thirsty, you might go and kind of buy a bottle of water or any beverage, right? Now when you talk about learned drives, which means they are more or less psychological in nature, like they are not innate. Maybe you can understand this from this example. You are already having a car which you were using from traveling from one place to another, or from commuting from one place to another. Now maybe you saw your friend buying a very, hi-fi or a new advanced model of, let's say, any of the cars like Brezza, or maybe any car, let's say the new model of Mahindra Scorpion, something like that. Now, just to build up your self-esteem, you might also decide to buy that model. That can be considered as a learned drive. Like see, just imagine, you might wonder why you will see a lot of people, they will keep changing their mobiles. If you look at one of the functions, whether if you want to call someone, you want to text, or you want to chat or access social media platforms, your mobile could be perfectly working fine with respect to that, but still because of the learned drives, or you get fascinated by the new advanced models, or you want to be perceived as an innovator, someone who is known for buying the upgraded technology immediately as it comes, or something like that. So that basically comes across as a learned drive, and this is what a marketers usually keep on doing. They'll start hitting you on various psychological fronts, maybe to push your ego, or the other way around, to to make you come across as someone who is very smart, very advanced, and that triggers you to even buy products that are functioning well, or even the products that you are using now are completely working fine. So that can be considered as drive. As I just told you, drive could be innate or learned. Innate, something stemming from physiological needs, and learned, which are psychological in nature, could be related to self-esteem, status. And as and when you start studying advanced societies, or maybe you can say when basic needs are satisfied, you will always see that it is always the learned needs that will start dominating. See, you can't imagine someone who is not having his stomach full thinking of buying a BMW or maybe any other car which will add to their, let's say, social status, right? So once the basic needs are fulfilled, then the learned needs will start becoming more or less dominant. Now when you talk about cues, these are little, maybe you can say, weak than drive. Like they might not motivate someone to go ahead and kind of execute the behavior, or maybe buy something. If we talk about primarily with respect to sales, maybe place an order or close a deal, something like that. But these eventually impact which buying decision will be made and when it will be made. Now when you talk about cues, they can also be classified as triggering and non-triggering cues. Now triggering cues are those cues which have the power to initiate or activate the purchase. Whereas when you talk about non-triggering cues, these influence decision making process. Now these could be of two kinds: product related cues, which could be, let's say, the shape of the product, or the packaging of the product is very attractive, or there is something special about the product which catches your attention. Whereas you could also have non-triggering cues as informational cues, which means the information that basically comes from marketers, word of mouth, reference groups. Even when you talk about product cues, pricing can also be considered as a very important cue. See, but if you ask me, we might not be able to differentiate much if we start looking at consumers in a very broader, or maybe you can say if we get to very micro level also. Because let's say you could have someone, for them even product cues could work as triggering cues. Let's say they really like the shape of the product, or maybe let's say pricing was very low, they went ahead and bought it. Or maybe informational cues, when they were in a departmental store shopping for groceries, someone who had went for shopping with them suggested them, okay, this particular brand of biscuits is very good, or something like that, right? So this can also induce them to go ahead and buy it. But see, again I'll repeat it, if you look at on a broader level, sometimes we might not be able to differentiate between triggering and non-triggering cues. Like I'll give you one example. Let's imagine you have someone who is very price sensitive. For them it could be only pricing which will matter. If they see an ad, or let's say if we look at it from the perspective of the sales world dynamics, if the salespersons offer them a very huge discount or a special pricing which is very less as compared to what competitors are offering, they might go ahead and purchase the product then and there itself. But I definitely leave you with this thought of thinking about how do you think triggering and non-triggering cues are going to matter as far as the sales dynamics are concerned. Now when you move further, response, it is simply what a buyer does signifies the response. Maybe if you look at it from after connecting it with, let's say, drives and cues, you can see how an individual is responding to the drives and cues which are being presented to them. And reinforcement is defined as an event that intensifies the buyer's predisposition towards making a particular response. Reinforcement in simply ways can be also be attributed to reward. Let's say if you bought something and you were very satisfied with it, you will definitely go and buy it again, right? Until unless there is a new player in the market who is offering you something which is far better or much advanced than you are using now. And reinforcement can be both positive and negative. Positive means which is rewarding, and negative is all about removing an unpleasant experience. It is not like punishing something. That is not going to be a negative reinforcement. Like, maybe you can consider this example. Let's say if someone is not well, or maybe they are having, let's say, some kind of irritation in their throat. Now consuming, maybe let's say, cough syrup is kind of being done for removing the negative enforcement, because you want to get at the feeling of ease. So I really want you to understand the difference between positive and negative enforcement. Positive, which is related to a reward, and I am again repeating it, negative is all about removing maybe some kind of a, you can say, unfavorable or a negative stimulus. So I hope you got this differentiation. Now let's look at this equation which has been proposed by Howard. It comprises of B, which is called as a response or an act of purchasing, or how you maybe you can say your prospect will act. If we look at it from the sales perspective, P means the predisposition or the inward response tendency, which means the habit. Now this is only going to matter when you have been using the same product, let's say, or maybe you have used the same product for a couple of times. Now you have developed a kind of liking for it, which has now become a part of your habits. Now this is only going to work similarly in sales domain. Let's say if you are meeting a person or an individual or the client, I would say, who has already been using your product since long. Now he might have an element or a very stronger element of habit. Now if you move to D, K and V, D simply indicates the present drive level, which means how much motivated the person is with respect to buying your solutions or offering. Now this is also going to be dependent upon whether it is an immediate need for him or not. If you remember, when we were talking about this particular aspect of objections, there was one particular objection: I don't need the product now, or I don't have that immediate urgency. Now this is what present drive level will get impacted by, which means how motivated the person is to buy the product, let's say now itself, or maybe let's say if it is B2B selling the industrial product that you are offering, how much willing or how much need he has at this present times to kind of go ahead and make that deal. Now when you talk about K, it is basically talking about incentive potential, which simply means the reinforcement. What is the value that will be emerging from the product or the offering which you are kind of you'll be presenting to the prospect or the customer, and potential satisfaction emerging from it. Now when you talk about V, it is basically intensity of cues, which means the triggering and non-triggering elements. Now let's discuss briefly, or let me leave you with that thought process. What is the impact that a salesperson can have in all of these? See, one thing is, if you talk about predisposition or the inward response tendency, if the salesperson earlier has not only been focused about somehow just closing the sale and has working on that relationship or nurturing that relationship, that this is definitely going to be high. I'm talking about the predisposition element. That's why we say your job is not going to end once the sale is done. You should always make sure that you bring an element of satisfaction, or maybe you reward the prospect or the customer for kind of buying your product, and this will get translated into habits. Now when you talk about present drive level, it again becomes how much skill set the salesman is with respect to stimulating the drives. Now this can also be done in many ways. He might have not realized that how your offering is going to be beneficial for him. Let's say if it is a technical product or it is a machinery, and you make the other person realize how, the present version that you are using could go obsolete in just a couple of months, then again you will be reinvesting. And what if the taxes rise and you will be buying it at a very high price, and what we are offering you now is an advanced version at discount. It's more about making the other person realize their need. You make them, I would say, you make them realize that this is the product that they need for now, and how the even the relationship is going to be fruitful in future. Now incentive potential can definitely be impacted by making them realize the value that your product will bring in, or maybe giving them some freebies or giving them something extra which others have not been offering. Now when you get to way or intensity of cues, you can definitely impact both triggering and non-triggering cues. If let's say the person is very price sensitive, you can definitely trigger them by offering some discounts or offering the best value deal. And when you talk about non-triggering cues, you can definitely give them more of information, share testimonials, or maybe let's say provide them more informational cues which will kind of move them towards the stage of desirability or a heightened liking for the product. And see, there is one more thing which you need to understand as far as all these elements are concerned. If any of these elements is zero, because this is a multiplicative relationship, there will be no response, or if you look at it from the perspective of selling, you will not be able to close that deal. So I really hope you got this perspective about of how this equation is going to work, and how a salesman can actually impact P, predisposition or the inward response tendency, drive level, incentive potential, and finally the intensity of cues. Now there are a few points that you should remember as far as this particular theory is concerned. See, if the buyer is satisfied, which again getting into the perspective of predisposition, it is definitely going to lead to a very heightened level of involvement, or maybe you can say patronizing one particular seller, because this has becomes a part of habit formation for them, which means whenever they'll need to buy something, they'll be getting back to you, or maybe they'll be using your product. Now another thing which you need to understand is, it's not the case that always sellers will be reinforcing the buyer. Definitely that is going to work, initial stages when the buyer is new to you, or you are not having that kind of a relationship with the buyer. But in the subsequent stages, or as the time passes, even buyers can reinforce. See, I'll explain you why this matters. When you have a buyer who has been working as an advocate for you, or spreading positive word of mouth about your product, or has been buying again and again from you, if you talk about in terms of positive reinforcement from the buyer, you will also be willing to offer them more of benefits, right? Because you know that this person or this party is definitely going to stay with you for a longer time. Likewise, when you talk about a seller, through value creation, providing extra inducements, discount, freebies, or maybe working as a collaborator with them and working towards nurturing relationships, they can also reinforce the buyer. Now this, see, we are primarily looking at it from the perspective of economic aspects, which means the benefits you are giving to them, which could be calculated in terms of money. And this can also happen by nurturing relationship, because if you develop a very strong collaborative or a value creative relationship with respect to your buyers, it is definitely going to add to the reinforcement. Because see, I think we talked about this at one point of time, you will not have all the prospects buying simply out of the benefits that they see in products. They could also act to a certain degree with respect to the emotions that you share with them. Now as far as this particular model is concerned, and you talk about predisposition, another important thing which we need to understand is cognitive dissonance. Now before I get into further of it, I want you to understand what cognitive dissonance is. Now cognitive dissonance simply means the feelings of, maybe feeling like, okay, I didn't make the right choice, right? Let's say if someone has purchased a product from you, or the deal has been closed, they might go through the feelings, okay, I did not make the right choice, or some kinds of doubts that they might go through after the post purchase. Maybe this is called as a post purchase dissonance, when the other person starts feeling or is not very confident of what he has done. Now you might be wondering, but why this matters when the deal has been closed? Simply because if this feeling persists, or maybe you can say the person who has closed the deal simply feels that the other foregone alternatives were better, he might not get that element of satisfaction which could be a hindrance with respect to future relationship, as well as it might also restrict the person who has closed the deal by looking at the positive aspects of your product, which will again delimit the positive word of mouth, which could be very beneficial for you. Now a salesperson is definitely going to play a very crucial role in this. You might be wondering how, or how they could do it. One is they can do this by talking about the negatives of the foregone alternative, which means you are eventually making the party realize you have made the right choice, this is the best product, and you kind of have a discussion with them about the positive aspects of the product which they have bought or service which they have bought. Now the other way could be you make them realize at length about why this product is suitable and how much value it will add for your customer who has bought it. In a way, see, what you are doing is you are either making it look better than the other alternatives and making them appear to be a little inferior, or maybe talking about their negatives. Other ways you are talking about the positives or giving or fostering the confidence of the buyer with respect to making the right choice. See, even if you get to marketing communications, you will see that a lot of companies come up with the ad when they say, you know, this is the right choice that you have made, congratulations on selecting the best product, or congratulations on being a part of a very large, satisfied and happy XYZ product family. All these are aspects of kind of reducing the dissonance when you talk about, you know, marketing or selling domain. Now I hope as far as this particular theory was concerned, you got some perspectives about behavioral equations theory. In case you have any doubts or you have different thoughts, we'll be happy to read about them in the forum. Now when we move forward, we'll be talking about the buying formula theory, which was proposed by E.K. Strong Jr. He was the one who coined the term buying formula. Now this precisely underlines the buyer's side, which means that it is the salesperson's responsibility to kind of help the buyer solve his or her problems. Why we are saying buyer's side? Because they are saying eventually the core responsibility of the salesperson is to make the field buyer satisfied by solving any of their problems. Now as far as this theory is concerned, this is how we look at it. What the proponent of this theory are actually saying is, it is the job of a seller to make the need felt. See, whenever he is meeting the prospects, maybe let's say by using the spin space selling approach or any other approach, it is his responsibility to make them realize that how this particular offering is going to solve their problems. Now a seller has made them realize how this will be solving their problem, his job is to assure them how the particular offering which they will be presenting to the buyer is very adequate and should generate positive feelings as well. Now once this is done, then they will make them realize how this corporate or the organization or the particular trade name is adequate and will again be generating pleasant feelings. It's more like making them realize that the seller that you will be dealing with stands synonymous to trust and occupy, you know, maybe work towards occupying a share of their mind, heart and wallet. Now you might be wondering why this matters. Let's understand this from a very simplistic example. Let's say your mobile gets crashed or it's not working and it needs repairs, something like that, and you decide to buy a new one. You realize the need. We are done with that part. Right. Now you finally decided, if you get into the market and you start exploring various brands, you could buy a Samsung mobile, you could buy a Motorola, you could buy an Apple iPhone, you could buy the newly launched Nothing, which is again creating a lot of buzz, you know, on social media platforms, or any other brand. Now it is important for you to get associated with that particular brand with pleasant feelings, right? Because only then it is going to top your list with respect to your preferences or consideration sets. That's why pleasant feelings or finding a trade name or a brand educate becomes important, because there are so many options available in the market and everybody could have some positives or maybe some line of negatives. You are only going to pick up the brand finally which you will find adequate, or maybe, you know, beyond your certain level of adequacy, and you will associate positive feelings with that. That's why this becomes important. Apart from that, it talks about satisfaction, which again means the job of a salesman is not going to end once the deal has been closed. He or she should always work towards creating a feeling of satisfaction or making the other person feel better, or maybe I would say, with respect to the discussion we just had, reducing the level of cognitive dissonance, right? See, we recently discussed almost, if we talk about the last session and the present ongoing session, we talked about a few selling theories. We spoke about spin selling, which was proposed by Neil Rackham. We recently spoke about behavioral equations theory, buying formula theory. We also spoke about other aspects which, can be associated with right set of circumstances theory. So see, the whole point which I want you to understand now is what is their practical relevance. See, if you look at it with time, every salesperson is going to develop his or her own style, and they will have their own way of, maybe you can say their own magical way of approaching the situation, or with which they deal with the prospects or existing customers. But if you specifically talk about new salesmen, whether you talk about spin selling, right set of circumstances theory, behavioral equations theory, or buying formula theory, they definitely have some important points which we can derive help from. Like spin selling can be used as a model, or maybe let's say the pathway for a new salesman when he is kind of meeting the prospect for the first time. Mentally, he can definitely drive, the road towards, like, firstly talking about situation, then trying to pick up, what is the problem that can be highlighted with respect to that, then talking about the implications part of the problems, and finally getting into the implications of it, how this particular offering can be of helpful for them. Now if you then get to the right circumstances theory, or right set of circumstances theory, you can highlight the role of ambience, which means working towards bringing in the right cues or the right ambience in which you can push the sale. If you remember, I also gave you this perspective on that. If say someone wants to propose someone, they'll be, getting flowers or booking for a date in a very, you know beautiful place or a restaurant or something like that, to make them feel special, because we eventually know what they would like to hear. So this is about creating those right circumstances. Likewise, a salesperson can also do that. He might take the client, maybe let's say, for a lunch or an outing, or maybe, for a drink or something like that, and then he might talk about or discuss the possibilities of getting into the deal. Likewise, if you then get to the aspects of buying formula theory or behavioral equations theory, they also have something to offer. If you talk about moving this path from need to finally satisfaction, you also need to make sure that the prospect finds your trade name or the brand as well as the service offering adequate with respect to solving his or her problems, right? And apart from that, it should also generate positive feelings, which mean you are also talking about the fact that when you are offering cognitive cues to the prospect, or let's say the customer, you should always make sure that it should finally get converted into positive effectives, which will eventually make the person feel or have that feel good factor with respect to your brand. You will always find a lot of people who use an iPhone, being it very expensive or other factors, they will always defend it, and they themselves have that feel good factor with respect to the brand value that it brings in, right? So this is something, one line, or maybe some, I would say, this is in a way like the path which I want you to think about as far as various brands, or whatever offerings are there for, are offered by the organizations are concerned. You will always be able to track down some of the effectives, or maybe you can say an element of bringing in those pleasant emotions, or kind of associating it with a particular brand, because if you are looking for a long term association, this again is going to make a lot of difference. So this is one thing which I again wanted you to understand. Apart from that, I would say the whole dynamics of all these selling theories is that they definitely provide a lot of takeaway. As far as the new salesmen are concerned, these can definitely be used as the skeletal frameworks whenever the person is clueless about how he should be or she should be approaching the prospects or the clients. So we just had a discussion, or maybe we can say we finished discussing about various selling theories. We started from AIDS model, which was about attention, interest, desire, action, and finally satisfaction. Then we also spoke about right set of circumstances theory, which was all about creating right ambience, or maybe, leaving the right, I would say, stimuli towards the prospect so that the sale is made. Or then we also spoke about spin selling, again one of the fantastic theories by Neil Reicham, which talks about situation questions, problem questions, implication questions, and need payoff questions. Then recently in this session we spoke about behavioral equations theory and buying formula theory. Now what I'll be doing now is I'll be leaving you with some thoughts about what could be the practical relevance of the discussed selling theories. I'll be kind of sharing my thoughts, but I also want you to think what do you think is the relevance of these theories, and definitely you can share your views in the forum. Now, when you talk about all these theories, whether it is AIDS or it is right set of circumstances, spin selling, or behavioral equations theory and buying formula theory, these definitely provide, a kind of a skeletal framework to definitely the new salesmen who are new in business. Let's say if you have someone who could be meeting the prospect, they could definitely be clueless about, how they are going to start the conversation or how they are going to take it forward. Or see, they might be completely, out of, maybe you can say, ideas of with respect to starting, ending, or pitching the product in between. So the best they can do is maybe they can use the spin framework, in which they can first talk about the situation questions, then finally, about the problem that they think they can highlight from the situation that they just spoke about, then maybe talking about, you know the implications questions if the particular problem is not solved, and finally about need payoff, how their offering is going to be a value creator or is going to solve problem for them. Likewise, if you talk about right set of circumstances theory, it again holds some importance. If you remember, I gave you this perspective about, like, if you are taking someone for a date, you would definitely, buy flowers which they like, or maybe book a particular fantastic or, nice place for a date or something like that, which means you'll try to create an environment in which you want to make them feel good, and then hear yes or whatever the case be, right? So if you apply the same to selling part, maybe see, a salesperson can definitely, create a right ambience and then kind of push the products, or maybe push the envelope a little further to crack that deal. Maybe, you could take the prospect, let's say, for a lunch or maybe for a drink or something like that. Then at the right time you can definitely talk about how things are to be taken forward. Apart from that, if you talk about, let's say, behavioral equations theory, you can't deny the fact that it definitely brings in the element of handling cognitive dissonance, which has not been discussed so far. And why this becomes important is because in the present highly technological environment, where it is very very easy for the, people, even after when they have made the purchase, to collect more information on internet or through other websites, forums, it is very important that they should be made to feel that they have made the right choice. Because you might see, the person who has just closed the deal kind of collecting more information and then calling you and saying, I don't think I made the right choice or something like that. So cognitive becomes very very important, because if you miss out on handling that part, there are going to be lower levels of satisfaction, which again is going to decrease, someone talking positively about your product or offering to other people, and maybe it will make them feel less satisfied, which again will reduce the chances of cross selling and upselling. So cognitive dissonance becomes very very important. Likewise, if you talk about the other parts, it also talks about these elements of drives, cues, response, and reinforcement. Then reinforcement again become important, because you need to make the other party feel good or reward them in ways so that their habits with respect to buying your offering again and again are kind of enhanced. Now when you talk about the last part which we discussed just now, which is about, let's say, buying formula theory, it again becomes important that you don't miss out on the element of making the prospect feel how your particular offering is adequate with respect to solving their problems, as well as the trade name. It should generate the feelings of both adequacy or going much beyond adequacy in a positive sense, and always generating pleasant feelings about your product, right? As I just explained, the other person, buyer, is definitely going to have a lot of options with respect to the solutions he wants to buy. Now once the salesperson is successful in kind of making the prospect realize how this solution is adequate in solving their problem, as well as stimulating positive emotions with respect to the trade name or the brand which you are kind of associated with. So this is again something which becomes very important. So as far as this session was concerned, I hope you enjoyed learning about the remaining selling theories and also about what is the practical relevance as far as these theories are concerned. But I really want you to think more about it and share your views on the forum, and then we'll be talking more about it, and we'll definitely get back to you on the forum as well. Now, as we'll be moving forward, we'll be definitely talking about another thrilling aspect of selling, which is the Miller Heiman approach. And trust me, it is very, very exciting. So, looking forward to meeting you in the next session. Thank you.